Mud opened like a mouth and tried to swallow two small lives. Lena's hands clawed at the surface, nails packed with wet earth. Lila's cry broke into hiccups and silence, the sound of thin thread against wind. A man ran, boots tearing free with a suction pop only panic can outpace. He didn't call for help. He waded in. "Look at me," he said, voice low, steady. "I've got you." One wrist, then the other, slick with mud. A small body heaved upward. Then the twin's twin, ribs straining, breath burning, the world narrowing to the span of his reach. He dragged them onto a strip of grass that held like a promise and collapsed with them, chest heaving, their faces pressed against his shoulder. A boy of 10 knelt at the bank, hands white-knuckled against the dirt, whispering words only he and his father could hear. "Come on, Dad. Don't let go." In the trees beyond, a woman stood very still. She did not call out. She watched her entire world folded into a stranger's arms, and she trembled. Earlier that morning, Jonah Mercer tied Eli's shoelaces in a double knot and pretended not to notice when his son undid them, retied them, and grinned at getting it right. These rituals mattered, the second tug, the quiet pride, the way a boy's chin lifts when he knows he's growing into his father's shadow. Jonah poured coffee into a dented thermos, set out 2 apples, one freckled and small, one smooth and red. He brushed Eli's hair down with a damp palm, not because it needed it, but because touch was the one thing he never withheld. Outside, the thaw had loosened the riverbank into something treacherous and soft. The path smelled of wet leaves and cold earth. Jonah knew where the ground would hold and where it would not. Laws had taught him such things, how to test each step, how to listen to the quiet that warns you, how to become, in the absence of certainty, a shore for someone else. It had been 2 years since the woman he loved was lowered into the ground. 2 years since Eli had clung to his side at the graveside and whispered, "Don't let go of me too." Far off, an engine stilled. A black sedan eased onto the turnout, where the river curved like a question mark. The driver walked the tree line, hands deep in his coat, not unkind, just inattentive. In the back seat, a woman finished a call she did not want to end, and, when it ended anyway, stared at her palm as if it had betrayed her. Vivian Hale had flown across nights that bled into one another, boardrooms stacked like mirrors, calendars denser than grief. She was practiced at being present everywhere but here. Her daughters were not. Lena and Lila, 7 years old, twin sparks of the same flame, spilled out of the car with the prodigal energy of children who have spent too many hours strapped still, and their laughter shot like silver minnows across the morning. Dragonflies rose from the shallows and turned to glass in the light. River and reed stroked small ankles. The ground flexed. Eli heard the first scream before Jonah did. It wasn't a word. It was the sound a violin makes when a string snaps mid-note. Jonah ran before thought could catch him. He did not look back to check where his son was. He knew where Eli would be, in the space just behind him, smaller but fierce, like a shadow made of love. The mud pulled and let go, pulled and let go. He went into his thighs, then his hips, hands forward, fingers splayed. "I can't," Lena's voice splintered. "You can," Jonah said. "Eyes on me. Breathe in. Now give me your wrists." Eli dropped to his knees, belly to the bank, fingers digging into dirt as if his grip could anchor his father. His eyes burned with silent pleading. "Don't let go." Jonah found Lena's wrist first. She was light like frightened things are when they don't trust the ground. He pulled, and the mud argued with a sound like bread torn too hot. Lila sank, panic dragging her down as surely as gravity. "Hold her," Jonah said, placing Lena onto grass as gently as a father lays a fevered child in a cool bed. "Don't let go." He didn't say to whom, and it didn't matter. Eli reached out without thinking, and Lena's fingers latched onto his sleeve like she'd always known it. He turned back, dug barehanded into the cold that steals thinking away. He found a shoe first, then a shin, then skin, then the fragile knob of a knee. "I have you," he told the mud, as if it were a thing that could be reasoned with. He braced and lifted, a sound between a grunt and a prayer fought through his teeth. Lila came up in a surge of mud and sunlight, slick and sobbing, and he slid backward with her until the earth carried their weight without complaint. The twins clung like vines. Lena's cheek was pressed to his sternum. Lila's breath shivered against his collarbone. He felt the small drum beats of their hearts begin to slow. He breathed with them. Eli's hand rested on his shoulder, a boy's steady anchor. Leaves whispered. The river kept talking in its old language. Vivian stepped from behind the trees. Hurried steps towards her twins, and she knelt. Her knees sank into wet earth, and almost like a crawl she reached for her girls. Hands that signed away and acquired futures for strangers now trembled as they stroked her daughter's mud-clotted hair. She said their names into their scalps the way mothers do, like prayers with teeth. "Thank you," she said finally, looking at Jonah as if she were realizing that gratitude was a muscle she had let atrophy. "They're safe," he said, as if that were the whole of it. He looked at her for only a beat, long enough to notice that her eyes were greener up close than they were from far away, long enough to see the brittleness behind polish. Then his gaze dropped to the twins again, where it belonged. "Come to the cabin," Jonah said quietly. "They need to rest." Jonah's cabin sat back on the water, in the kind of clearing trees make when they've decided a place is needed more by someone else. It smelled like cedar and coffee. Eli's drawings lined the wall, clumsy stick horses and square trucks, and a sun that always had too many lines. Jonah laid quilts that had belonged to his grandmother over the twins, the stitched stars softened by decades of winters. He made tea strong and sweet. The room carried only breathing until Eli fidgeted. His hand went to his pocket and drew out a small locket, plain silver, worn smooth at the edges. He opened it once, just enough for the twins to see the faded photograph inside, a woman with his same smile. "She was my mom," he said softly. "She died 2 years ago. I keep her close." The twins leaned in, reverent in the way children are when shown something precious. Their little fingers brushed the locket with the care of a promise. Vivian watched Jonah's eyes soften at the sight, watched the way Eli carried, watched the way grief lived here not as absence, but as presence that demanded gentleness. Something inside her cracked. "I wasn't there," she said quietly, though no one had asked. The sentence wore 1,000 mornings. It could have changed. "I was finishing something." Jonah nodded, not absolving, not judging, just making a space large enough for honesty to sit down. "They're here now," he said, and the words sat in the room like firelight. Evening dragged the edges of trees into ink. The driver cleared his throat from the porch. The twins woke the way birds do, all at once and startled. Their hands searched for Jonah's sleeve before finding their mother's. Vivian whispered, "We'll come back." Jonah only inclined his head. He didn't ask when. He didn't ask why. He knew the way to promises better than to press them. Their eyes met, hers a storm learning its edge, his the steady of weathered boards. Nothing was promised. Something was understood. Days slipped. Jonah mended a fence that had leaned all winter and pretended not to check the road. Eli polished the locket with his shirt hem, careful like tending a flame. They returned on a Friday without thunder. The sky had the wash blue look of a white shirt dried on a line. The twins ran from the car straight for Eli the way children run, when the world has taught them they are allowed to. Vivian walked, which made it easier to see that she had chosen her steps. Her hair was braided back. Her coat was simpler. The air around her had less distance in it. Jonah straightened from the fence. His hands were raw along the knuckles. He didn't reach for a rag. He let himself be seen. She took a breath she had owed herself for years. "I thought I had everything," she said, not playing to the audience money had always set for her. "Then I saw what you gave them." He didn't tell her it was nothing. He didn't deflect. He just stepped closer until the fence rail pressed lightly against his thigh and the space between them thinned. Eli, without fanfare, slipped his hand into the twins. Their small chain made a bridge no architect could draw. Then Eli reached into his pocket, pulled out the locket, and placed it in Vivian's hand. "You can keep her now," he said quietly, glancing at his father, "because I think she'd want us all together." Vivian's breath caught. Her thumb brushed the worn silver, as though touching the memory of a woman she'd never met. Jonah's eyes flicked to hers, wide, unguarded, undone. "What now?" she asked, not a challenge, not a test, just a woman asking in daylight. "Tea," Jonah said. It was not witty. It was not grand. It was an open door. Eli grinned like he'd been waiting for this particular word the whole week. The twins nodded the nod of children who had decided the world is right side up in this one small corner. They went ahead across the yard, and their laughter made a new map between porch and fence. Jonah and Vivian did not kiss. Not yet. He reached past her to lift the gate latch. She laid her palm over his for a heartbeat longer than intention. In that small crossing of skin, something unguarded passed between them. A promise to keep showing up, to remake the old rituals for new hands. The first quiet drops of evening found the fence line. The house light came on and did not flicker. Inside, cups waited. Breaths steadied. Second chances do not announce themselves. They sit down and ask if you'll make room. If this found you when you needed a gentler kind of courage, let it linger. Share it with someone whose hands are tired and whose hope is still learning to stand. Stay with us for more small lanterns in the dark. Stories of quiet kindness, redemption, and the families we find by accident and keep on purpose. Subscribe and walk with us to the next porch light.